Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. We thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Denise McLeese, and I am the coordinator for the social justice initiatives here at the YWCA of Bucks County. And um, we will have our presenters to briefly give an introduction before we move forward.
My name is Paula Powers-Watts, and I'm the Executive Director at Credit Counseling Center here in Richboro, Pennsylvania.
And I am Jasmine Craig, she, her. I'm the Director of Education Outreach and Training at A Women's Place, which is Bucks County's only domestic violence organization.
Thank you. And as you all know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And the YWCA sets aside 1 week in October that we tag a week without violence. It's a week to raise awareness and to engage action to end broad range violence against women and girls. At the Y, we know that not all violence is acknowledged or responded to equally, and that some victims go unrecognized altogether. That's why we focus on ending gender-based violence, including domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, trafficking, and harassment. And this is an overview of today's events. We will look at our goal, define financial trauma, and move right into understanding financial trauma, recognizing signs of financial trauma, and then ways that we can begin to cope with strategies and resources, following with questions and answers. Today's goal is to develop an understanding of racial or financial trauma, its causes and effects, and tools to heal from its impact as we foster and promote healthier financial behaviors. So let's define financial trauma. Financial trauma can be defined as the emotional and psychological distress caused by negative financial experiences that significantly impact an individual's well-being. And also, unlike everyday financial stress, which can be a normal part of life, financial trauma goes beyond temporary worry or anxiety. That's why it is crucial to recognize that financial trauma differs significantly from everyday financial stress. It extends far beyond monetary concerns. So we will move right into understanding financial trauma.
I'm going to start off by just explaining, kind of reiterating what Denise just shared with us. Financial trauma can arise from a variety of circumstances. Some common causes include job loss or unemployment. That sudden, prolonged unemployment can cause financial distress in a great way, especially if you have a family and children. Debt, accumulation of debt, especially high interest debt such as credit cards and payday loans, which we're not too much of, but every now and again. And unexpected expenses, sudden unforeseen costs like medical bills, home repairs, and vehicle breakdowns. These things can lead to financial trauma. And here's a real life scenario concerning a job loss. So I am going to read this out and change the name to protect the innocent. How's that? Harry was so happy to get his new job as a warehouse picker. He showed up for work early every day, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not keep up with the demand for pulling items off the shelves for shipment. He received 3 written warnings about his production during his 4 months of employment. Although he had never worked so hard in his life, he was eventually terminated. Harry was devastated. The work caused him physical pain, and the stress of the job loss caused him a loss of sleep, loss of appetite, and self esteem. Harry was now once again without sufficient income to sustain his basic living expenses. And Harry is not the only one, but this is Harry's financial trauma. Here's a real life scenario concerning debt. Mr. and Mrs. Manley were retired senior citizens living on a fixed income. They had more than enough income to sustain their living expenses, but in their commitment to help their grandchildren secure college educations, they co-signed on student loans and took out loans themselves to help their grandchildren. They always thought they could manage the repayment, but over time, the loans ballooned beyond their financial capacity. All that interest started compounding. Eventually, 15% of the couple's Social Security income was being garnished, and the hardship caused them great stress and turmoil. And many people are unaware that your Social Security or a senior citizen's Social Security income can be garnished up to 15% for a federal debt. So this could be absolutely devastating and traumatic. All right, here is a real life experience based on unexpected expenses. Kathy was meticulous with her finances. She used spreadsheets to track her expenses and managed to save little every month. She started to have problems with her car, but wanted to save until she could pay cash to have her car serviced. On her way to the child care center after work, her car would not go into gear after the light turned green. She was stuck at the traffic light. After calling a tow truck and someone to pick her child up from childcare, she found out her car needed a transmission. This was more than she could afford to pay for it in cash, and she had very limited credit. This setback caused a ripple effect of problems in her life. Now she's not only out of a car, she's having to struggle to get to work and to get her child to childcare and from childcare. Extremely traumatic for this mom. Additional causes for financial trauma could include health crisis, housing instability, which we deal with a lot here at Credit Counseling Center, economic recession or market crash, divorce and separation, financial obligations, natural disasters, generational poverty, business failure, and financial abuse or fraud. Each one of these can lead to so many habits and decision-making processes that are skewed because of the trauma.
Thank you so much, Paula. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more broadly about stress and trauma using some of the examples that Paula did just share. So just to reiterate, stress is a natural human response that prompts us to adjust challenges and threats in our lives. Everyone experiences stress to some degree, right? So biologically, stress activates something in us that helps us to get through some of those challenges. And then trauma, on the other hand, is an overwhelm. Okay, so trauma, there's the definition, is a response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes their sense of self and their ability to feel the full range of emotions and experiences. So when we are talking about financial trauma, this is what we are talking about. I just want to make that clear. And also reiterate that it's not our fault, right? When we are faced with situations and circumstances that overwhelm our capacity, it's not our fault that we don't know what to do, or we can't act maybe logically in some situations, or we feel helpless. But hopefully after this, presentation, you'll feel a little bit more able to support others who are facing this type of trauma, and also maybe yourself if you're experiencing this type of trauma. So there are 3 types of trauma that we can experience. One is acute trauma, right? So that is a situation that happened, one situation, okay, that caused an overwhelm. Then we have complex trauma. So that is a bunch of different kind of situations occurring over time that have created an overwhelm to the system. And then there's chronic trauma. So that's typically one situation that is occurring over time that is creating an overwhelm in ourselves. So when we are looking at how that relates to financial trauma, we're going to look at those examples on the far right side of your screen. So examples of acute financial trauma that Paula already talked about would be that immediate job loss, a health crisis that occurred, a natural disaster, that the unexpected medical bills, the unexpected car bills, right? That is an acute financial trauma that could overwhelm our capacity to deal with that in kind of a healthy way. Right? Then we have examples of complex trauma. So this could be like relationship abuse. Okay, so financial abuse is a tactic of domestic or intimate partner violence. This is, something obviously that we deal with at a woman's place is the tactic of financial abuse being used as a form of coercive control. So it can be part of the complexity of, trauma that's being experienced. And then we have chronic trauma. So again, this is kind of that one event that is happening over a period of time. So that can look like generational poverty, prolonged unemployment, or that debt accumulation that Paula was talking about. So again, when we are talking about trauma, okay, our body gets hijacked by trauma responses. I should say trauma reaction, right? And I say that because there is a difference, right? When we are responding to a stressor, we are able to engage some of our problem solving skills, some of our logic, right? Some of our reason and rationality. When we are responding to a trauma, our bodies are awesome and we go into survival, right? So part of who we are gets hijacked and we react maybe in certain trauma survival ways. So because our bodies are feeling like this is a trauma that we are experiencing and we need to react to survive. Okay, so here are the 5 main forms of trauma reaction: flight, freeze, fawn, and flop. I'm sure you've heard of like fight or flight. There are more. And here is what it might look like if we are engaging some of these responses of reaction to financial trauma. Okay. So fight, when you're engaged in fight, it might look like hyper independence, right? I don't need help. I'm going to figure it out on my own. Very solutions driven, very high energy, which can lead to being a little bit combative, easily exhausted, no long-term plan. We're very reactionary. We're very much, we're going to like fix this, and I don't need it. Okay. That can be fight. Light, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite. It's avoidance, right? Maybe if I do not have the capacity, so I'm just gonna avoid, right? I'm not gonna check the mailbox because like I cannot see all of my bills that are coming in. I'm gonna just close accounts. I'm not gonna answer the phone and the bill collectors and everything. Maybe I'm gonna continually like relocate or find different jobs, right? Job to job or city to city, hoping it just goes away. So again, it's fast moving. Again, there's no real long-term plan there. It's really just what can I do to survive, right, in this moment. Then we have freeze. So freeze is going to look very tight. Freeze is more slow motion, decision fatigue. It's like a deer in headlights, right? Like I do not have the capacity to make financial decisions right now. I do not have the capacity to like Google anything, research anything, figure out anything, right? Really decision fatigue. It might be denial. Like maybe if I just like, it'll just go away, right? This overwhelm can lead to things like eviction, repossession, loss of life-sustaining essentials because there is no movement, right? We're literally just frozen. So that debt won't go away. Then we have fawning. So fawning is people pleasing. Fawning is to stay safe. I'm just kind of going to be overly submissive, kind of give them everything they want, put others before ourselves. And what this can look like is, let's say you were talking to a debt collector. Okay, like that's not a problem. Yeah, we can figure this all out. Okay, I'll get you, I'll make those payments, like kind of telling everybody what they want to hear, but not actually having a plan or a way to figure that out. And if you're just kind of talking to everyone or calling different people and kind of telling them, giving them what they want to hear, you might get conflicting or confusing information that can kind of apply because you don't necessarily have some of that critical thinking. You don't know what the right questions are to ask. You don't know, you're not planning to see if this is really doable for you and your circumstance. And then we get to flop. So flop can seem like freeze, but it is a little bit different. So unlike freeze, which is very tight, right? Kind of deer in headlights, flop is very loose, like you collapse into yourself. This is the give up. This is the defeat. You can be easily controlled with flop, with susceptible to scams, harmful advice. You're just kind of you've just kind of decided that you're powerless to do anything. You're just going to kind of, which can lead to some susceptibility with like knowing who to follow, knowing the correct advice, things like that. Okay, so, so we, definitely want to acknowledge that gender-based violence, financial abuse, financial trauma can happen to anyone. However, there are specific challenges for women and female identifying individuals, as well as kind of non-binary individuals. And some of those challenges come from a historical lens, right? So when we're talking about understanding trauma, recognizing the trauma, and then how do we work through those traumas. We also have to understand that even if it is an acute financial trauma, it happens within a bigger context, right? So in order for us to figure out how to respond well, how to tell our body that these, trauma reactions might not be serving us, might not be helpful, we also need to make sure that we are understanding solutions that are geared toward some of the intersectional barriers that certain demographics might face. And I just want to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what I'm talking about when I say that. So women have been historically disempowered, okay, in America. And you can see for 198 years in America, women couldn't take credit cards out in there. So I just chose 1776 start date because, that's when we were official. But it wasn't until 1974 that women could take credit cards out in there. Okay. So when we're talking about historical disempowerment, for 198 years, our institutions in America did not recognize women with credit, didn't empower women to have credit history, all of those things. Our institutions were not set up to support that success for women. Okay. For 124 years, women weren't allowed to own property in the United States. Again, like when we're talking about home ownership, when we're looking at statistics of home ownership, where do women fall? It's just, again, something that we need to consider. For 202 years, women could be fired due to being pregnant. Okay, so that ended in 1978. So it's only been, 202 years, they could be fired. How many years, that they can't be fired? But we have to consider that there are still some challenges when it comes to careers, when it comes to, family planning and working women and single women and our single parents. And all of this has to do with, financial trauma that we could potentially face and how we survive that financial trauma if we don't have access to, stable income. And you could say, well, jobs have changed. And maybe that's true. Some, institutions' policies may have changed, but some by practice, maybe it hasn't, or by social norms in some, jobs it hasn't. So again, things to think about when we are trying to empower women or people, but women specifically, to move out of financial trauma. For 234 years, women couldn't obtain health insurance at the same monetary rate as a man. That changed only in 2010. 2010. Okay. And then for 345 years, all Ivy League schools didn't allow women to obtain degrees. So again, when we're thinking about access, financial access, it wasn't until 1981 that all Ivy League schools accepted women earning degrees. And the first two were Princeton and Yale. And it was 1969. Okay, so again, when we're talking about access, there is, historically women have been disempowered, which makes sense looking at the next set of statistics, that we are still, as a society, as feeling the legacy of that historical disempowerment that can lead to extra financial trauma for women specifically, and pose more challenges for surviving that trauma. So in 2024, women still earn 16% less than men on average. The poverty rates of transgender adults, 29%, and cisgender bisexual women, 29%, tower over those of other groups. So those are most the living in poverty, those demographics in the US. 1 in 5 women experience financial abuse compared to 1 in 7 men. So although everyone can experience some type of financial trauma, you can see that women are disproportionately experience it at higher.
We'll now look at signs, how to recognize signs of financial trauma.
So I'm just going to give a bigger overview, and then Paula is going to go into some more detail of recognizing and impact of financial. So we talked a little bit about how financial trauma put us in survival. Okay, and so what that means is that there are psychological and psychosomatic effects. So we can feel it in our body, living with kind of chronic or long-term trauma, and having our bodies function in survival mode for a long period of time. So, what can that look like? It can look like embarrassment, shame, grief, isolation, denial, anxiety. Okay, obviously, I just want to reiterate that it is not our fault when we are dealing with trauma, when we're dealing with stressors, especially things we cannot control. It's not our fault, and it's also not our fault when we don't necessarily have the skills and the tools in our toolbox to adequately address some of those things successfully. We, aren't necessarily taught financial literacy in schools, right? We're not necessarily given the tools to be able to handle these things. And so I understand that, some reactions could be embarrassment and shame, but I also want to validate that it's not your fault. And then in our bodies, how do we feel? How do our bodies handle, kind of trauma and living in chronic survivalism? Headaches, stomach aches, jaw, neck pain, insomnia, nausea, like these are all kind of effects of trauma, any type of trauma, right? And chronic stress. And this can also lead to further financial trauma or stress because we're not dealing, maybe we then don't have doctor's visits or doctor's appointments or medical bills that we can't pay because we're carrying, we have back pain, we've got jaw pain, etc. So then another impact of financial trauma is decision making. We went over a little bit of the different survival instincts. We're impulsive, right? A lot of when we're dealing with financial trauma and decision making, it can be because we're not engaged in kind of our logic brain. We maybe don't have the capacity to sit down or have the tools to create long-term plans. We're impulsive, reactionary, maybe irrational, very emotional, and immediate. Okay, and so how can that show up in relationships? Relationships can become unstable, inconsistent. You can feel isolated, especially if you don't have the expendable income to go hang out with your friends. You don't have the expendable income to, take your kids out to do those things. You don't have the expendable income to have date night, right? And on top of all of that, you have the way that you're interacting is from a place of survival, right? Which is very emotional. And you might have a lower capacity or a lower tolerance to your kids, to people that, to other stressors, to just normal disagreements, normal stressors in life. You are already in overwhelm. And so your capacity, you've kind of already met your capacity to be able to have healthier kind of interaction. Your other relationships might start to feel strained or stressed. So financial trauma really affects the range of who we are as individuals.
Some of the causes and the reactions to the financial trauma, I'm going to just tell you right now, Jasmine just laid it out. I mean, she broke it down so well in her slides. I was actually taking notes on a couple of things. But one of the things you mentioned, we talked about avoidance of financial discussions and decisions. That could be a huge reaction to a financial trauma. People experiencing financial trauma may avoid talking about money or making financial decisions due to anxiety, guilt, or shame. And sometimes you may even have someone in your family or in your world that just won't open up about some things that are going on. And you think they're stubborn, not realizing they may have experienced a financial trauma, or even you yourself. That impulsive spending, this is the other side of the spectrum. The financial trauma can lead to impulsive or emotional spending, a coping mechanism. This behavior can provide short-term relief or comfort, often exasperates the financial problems in the long term. And I like to think of it as when people tell me they're doing therapy shopping and they just want to feel good. So go out and buy some things that you know they're not on your budget. It's just to get out and make you feel like you're in control of something for a moment, and then it's got huge repercussions. Another one is financial disempowerment. Those affected by financial trauma may feel helpless or disempowered when it comes to controlling their financial situation. And one of the things I like to share about the work we do here at Credit Counseling Center is when we help people, we never know what their background is, what experiences they've had. But if I have someone that's coming to me for maybe assistance with their mortgage or their rent, and they bring to me a bag of unopened mail, they just haven't had the heart to just go through and decipher and open everything up to see where they really stand, that they feel disempowered. Like there's nothing I can do about it. I can't handle this. Jasmine, right track with this. I mean, I see this every single, I'm not going to say every week, at least monthly. And we're dealing with someone who's just not even opening the mail or answering the phone at all. They just can't do it. They're completely disempowered, frightened. Here is a real life symptom of, in the expression of avoidance. Emma and Zoe have overcome many challenges in their lives. As business owners, they impressed their friends and family over the years. When business revenues decreased and there was not enough income to pay the bills, Emma experienced anxiety and avoided speaking with Zoe about the condition of their finances. As time moved on, the guilt and shame Zoe experienced for not facing their dilemma head on caused them a tremendous amount of stress. So this can happen in any family or even friendship situation, business situation. The trauma of letting people down, you're feeling really good about yourself, and then things go south. You're not sure which way to go, who to reach out for help. Yep, anxiety is what then creep right in there, and all of a sudden you don't even feel comfortable discussing it with anyone, and the problem just grows. So that's Emma and Zoe's story, avoidance. Impulsive spending. For many years, Tanya worked several odd jobs, hoping to one day land her dream job of traveling the world. She was never able to afford to travel anywhere. She was very envious of her friend's success. Although her budget was stressed, she found great comfort in what some call, this is that retail therapy, right? The comfort Tanya found was only temporary relief when she was feeling down, and it led to exasperated financial problems in the long run. And we see that now, especially with the credit card interest rates having increased over recent years now, that debt is so hard to repay. You can buy yourself slippers and be paying for it at 35% interest for 3 years. It's just too hard to overcome those impulsive spending habits. But the reality is for this person, Tanya, she really just lived a life of envy, unfortunately, and she didn't feel accomplished. So this is one way that she felt accomplished, by shopping. Disempowerment. Mr. Smith had never considered taking a vacation or even going to a restaurant for that matter. His life, as he experienced it, was a continuation of never having enough. Even if he was offered a free dinner with friends, he dismissed the opportunity as a luxury he was not worthy of. Unfortunately, because of Mr. Smith's financial disempowerment, he did not leave the area of his neighborhood, not even for a medical appointment. His health suffered, and he had very few associates, and he felt helpless. So he kind of isolated himself because he didn't feel that he had the power to venture out and do things to even care for himself. And this is something that I personally have seen with people like my family. They come from sharecropping background. And down in the South, moving up, is just expectations are very different for many people. And for this person, Mr. Smith, I don't know if he ever expected to have success in his life or to have freedom and power to do things to care for himself. And he got stuck in this bubble. That his financial trauma of not having enough, it just, he was stuck in it. He could not get himself out. Additional symptoms of financial trauma could include difficulty managing finances, hypervigilance around money, seen that, guilt or shame about spending, reluctance to seek help, fear of the future, depression and anxiety, low self-worth, self-sabotaging behaviors, isolation, constant financial crisis mode, hoarding financial resources. A lot of times you wouldn't think some of these would be a result of a financial trauma. But if you think about someone who self-sabotages themselves, it's like, why did you spend all your money and now you can't pay for your rent? Why did you put yourself in this particular situation when you knew the first of the month was coming along? This person could be experiencing a financial trauma from their past, and this is just a symptom. So the reality is we try our best not to judge people, but to listen a little bit to see what is really going on. Hypervigilance around money. You would think someone with hypervigilance around money experiencing a financial trauma, they're just a control freak, right? But no, they could be experiencing a trauma from their past, from their childhood, where there wasn't enough money. They were always in dire straits. So now they feel the need to hold on to everything and make sure they just dollar, make sure it's going to the right place. There's no flexibility. That's a symptom of a financial trauma.
Coping strategies and resources.
When dealing with financial trauma, adopting immediate coping strategies can help regain control over finances and reduce stress. These strategies address both the emotional and the practical aspects of money management. Here are just a few techniques. Create a simple budget. You list your income, you list your expenses, and you gotta be real about it. If you know one of your expenses is to, I'm not saying this is a good expense, but it's part of your reality. If you buy, scratch offs every week, it's not a mystery where your money's going. Plug it in. Then when you bounce your income against your expenses, you'll be able to see if you can afford it or not. At least you're in control and you're managing your expenses. Prioritize those expenses. You have to pay for your roof over your head, your food, transportation, your medical. List your things in the priority they should fall in for you. It's different for everyone. Track your spending. This is one that's kind of tricky for some because now we have all these apps and like Amazon, you can just hit the finger on it and you without even thinking about it. So we have to really pay attention to what we're doing so that we're not so easily spending without thought and planning. So I know I've seen people that they have a dozen apps on their phone that are things that are going to trigger spending. I say get rid of it, but that makes it more difficult to track the spending if you've got all these apps and you're just spontaneously buying on your phone without even having to go anywhere, right? When you have to go to the store, you could at least say, okay, I'm not, you could turn up the light and not go to the store. And that was right on in your hand. Technology, it's got its good and it's got its bad. Seek credit counseling or legal advice. Meet with a credit counselor. Attend workshops and seminars just like this. Use financial resources. There's budgeting tools all over the place online. You find one that you're comfortable using and use it. Break down your financial goals. What are your goals? So you set some small and achievable goals. I like to look at goals in the period of time. What do I want to accomplish financially in the next 3 months, 6 months, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Break your goals down. Create an emergency fund so then when something does happen to your car or whatever, you have something to fall back on and it's not broke. This is something, though, that has to be really systematic. So, for instance, you start with just $25 a month and you say, I'm just going to take this away into my free checking account, whatever you have it, so an account that doesn't cost you any money. Just keep throwing that 25 in there. And it is like an invisible account to you. You really want to consider it if you have a by emergency. Also, let's say, your birthday comes around and you get some money for your birthday. You can just throw that money into that emergency account. But once you would be, okay, when am I going to be satisfied with what is in my emergency savings account? Do I feel comfortable having $3,000 in that account? But would it be better if I know my car is older, I may have a major repair that comes up in the next couple of years, 5,000, you have to determine what your comfort zone is and still be able to leave. So when you determine, okay, I want to have 3,000 or 5,000 in that emergency savings, to give yourself a period of time. I'd like to have that in savings within the next 18 months. Okay, 18 months divided by 3,000. That's your goal. That's what you're going to put away. So there is a strategy to make this happen for yourself. Distinguish between needs and wants. So this is critical when you're working on your budget because there are going to be things that are just not needs and they may not fit right now. So be willing to just get rid of those things if it's going to hurt your plan and your financial well-being. You want to be well. That is the goal, to be well. And all of this ties in your financial wellness and your emotional wellness, making good decisions, getting help if you need help, getting advice, using resources, all of it goes together. Your economic security does not lie in your job. It lies in your own power to think, to learn, to create, to adapt. That's true financial independence. That's true. Stephen Covey.
Yeah, so I'm going to be picking back off of what Paula has shared with you about very engaging very specific strategies and tools for financial empowerment. But I also think that that quote is really helpful for understanding how to kind of interrupt our trauma reactions, pausing, giving a little bit of space so that we can engage some of the critical thinking, so that we can build strategies, as well as reshape our belief system. So the other thing, you know, that Paula has been kind of mentioned is that trauma and financial trauma develops our belief system, right? And what does that look like? It could mean like if you know, we're pretty well off. Your belief system was that, you know, money was your security, and then you faced an acute trauma, either, you know, an environmental disaster, an immediate job loss. Your belief system might be like your life is over, right? That was your security. You might go into fight mode, right? You might go into, yeah, and so we also want to figure out how to reshape our belief system. If you are living in chronic poverty, like Mr. Smith, you know, your belief system might be, you know, this is life, right? There's no way to fix it, right? You might be in flop, you might be in defeat. So what that looks like is if I have a little bit extra money, yeah, maybe I am going to go splurge on something. If I'm getting my tax return, I'm used to the norm is you know, my life is you know, financial kind of poverty. So I'm going to go treat myself, right? That's kind of my belief system. But what happens is we kind of then get trapped in these trauma responses and reactions. So hopefully with some of these strategies, we'll be able to interrupt that trauma response and reshape some of our belief systems, our limiting beliefs around finances when you are dealing with, you know, financial trauma. So one of the strategies, obviously, education and awareness. Paula talked about different resources that you can access for education and awareness, credit counselors, wealth managers, you know, books, Google, you know, I mean, listen, you can Google something, but then please talk to a professional. Okay. And then goals and action steps. Again, Paula mentioned making sure that these goals are attainable, measurable, and small, one step at a time. Making sure that you do have a support system. We do know, again, we're going to interrupt those reactions of maybe isolation, of shame, of embarrassment, and really try to engage a support system. And then using our interpersonal skills, right? We know that there are psychological and psychosomatic effects of financial trauma, individual counseling, trauma therapy, practicing that self-care. It's all a part of, financial restabilization and empowerment. So this is an example of a goal template. And I will give Denise an empty worksheet so that you can have it as a tool for yourself as a way to maybe engage those strategies as well as what Paula mentioned to you, some of those specific strategies and goals. And I have this, because we also know that trauma is when you are in overwhelm. You're in overwhelm. So sometimes it might be nice to be like, well, talk to a credit counselor. Okay. But like, I don't have the capacity to even figure that out, right? So sometimes, again, we need support, even making those first steps. So this is an example of what this template is. And the icons refer back to the last slide. If you can go back, Denise, the icons refer back to the strategy for financial empowerment. Can you go back one slide, Denise? There you go. So you can see the different icons that are going to relate. You can go forward. Thank you. So let's say our goal is literally just to research credit forgiveness options. So again, Paul was talking about making very small steps, like small goals, okay? This is a very small goal to research credit forgiveness options. And that's the education and awareness. Action steps to prepare. I am going to schedule 1 hour in the calendar this week. That doesn't seem overwhelming to me. I can find an hour, okay? That's making a plan. Then we're going to, I'm going to Google IKEA because I know that they have a childcare center. It's free, right? So if you don't have, family nearby that can watch your kid, if you can't pay for a sitter, those are barriers that take emotional labor that we have to plan. And sometimes we don't have the capacity to figure that out. And so, we give up, we freeze, we flop, we whatever. Okay. So again, making sure, and that's the support system. Who can support you in reaching that goal? Okay. I'm going to Google IKEA. I'm going to drop that kid off in that free childcare. I'm going to go up to that cafe and get me my Swedish meatballs and sit down to research my forgiveness options. Okay. So then we're taking action steps toward that goal. I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes. That's our self-care. Okay. It might seem overwhelming to sit there for an hour with all of this really new information. So I'm going to do a half hour. I can do a half hour. I'm going to sit there, go all in for a half hour. Then I'm going to get up. I'm going to get my little, what do they have? Cinnamon rolls. Those are very good at IKEA. I'm going to come back for my next half hour. Okay. I'm going to take notes on questions I have. I'm not going to get bogged down by stuff I don't understand. I'm just going to take notes on it. I'm going to take notes on any follow-up items. Oh, maybe I want to look into that later. I'm not going to get sidetracked, right? I'm just going to take notes. So very clear and specific goals and steps toward this goal. Then to complete the goal, I did it. My hour is done. My kid is still in childcare. I have like some time to myself. Hallelujah. I'm going to notice my tension. Remember, we talked about carrying around this chronic stress. We can feel it in our bodies. Where am I? I can do some neck rolls. Let it out, right? If I get home, maybe I want to take a hot bath if I have the time, right? Do some stretching. Really take care of the self-care piece. And then my last action step is I'm going to create a new goal. And that'll be my next chart. The heading of my next chart is going to be call credit counselor and have my list of questions ready that I already took. Okay. So again, this can be useful for yourself, but it can also be helpful for someone else. If you're trying to support and advocate for them, you might think research credit forgiveness options isn't hard, that there might not be a lot of barriers to that. But for someone who is facing, kind of financial trauma, who is living in survival, who has limiting belief systems, this and has other barriers, right? Remember, like kind of the intersectional identity that can be challenging.
So it looks like we're kind of running out of some time. So I wanted to make sure that Paula and Jasmine's contact information was posted. And right now, if there is anyone that has a burning question that they would like Paula or Jasmine to answer, we would ask that you go ahead and ask your question now. All right, we have Blair, who has a question.
Hi. So, let's say I'm not like trying to buy a house or anything, like my credit score is fine. If I just need help like forming a budget, can I go to the credit counseling center?
Absolutely. That's one of our favorite things to do. Call the office and talk to the secretaries, and they'll get you started.
Okay, and there aren't any like income requirements because I know a
Nope,
lot of, okay, great. Thank
nope.
you.
And I will say, because Blair is a part of A Woman's Place, Miss Paula also was a guest speaker in our RISE program, which is our financial empowerment program. So we are connected.
Yes, yes. You just have to be a resident of Pennsylvania, and all our services are free.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we would like to thank everyone for joining us today. And any feedback that you would like to send our way would be greatly appreciated. And I thank Paula and Jasmine for taking the time to help us to be more aware of domestic violence as it pertains to financial trauma. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm signing off. Goodbye. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.